Hello and welcome to Newscentre. I am Ashmit Kumar. Now, the NDA government has set the ball rolling on simultaneous elections, touted to be India's biggest electoral reform since the independence. Today, the Union Cabinet cleared two bills. One, a constitutional amendment bill to conduct elections for the Lok Sabha and all state assemblies together. The second, an ordinary bill to align elections for assemblies in Delhi, Puducherry and Jammu and Kashmir, the Union Territories, to have their own locally elected legislative assembly. We learned from sources that the bills could be tabled in the Parliament this winter session itself. The winter session is scheduled to come to an end on December 20th. Just to give a quick recap, a high-powered panel led by former President Ramnath Kovind had submitted its report to President Draupadi Murmu in the month of March this year. The panel, in its recommendations, had argued that simultaneous elections will lead to optimization of resources and avoid policy paralysis.
वन इलेक्शन के प्रस्ताव के खिलाफ है क्योंकि ये गैर लोकतंत्र के खिलाफ है, गैर संवैधानिक है और ये संविधान का बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर जो मूल ढांचा है उसके खिलाफ है, पर लोकतंत्र के खिलाफ है। लोकतंत्र को खत्म करने वाला एक विधेयक है। इसका तो हम विरोध करेंगे।
हमारी पार्टी सपोर्ट करती है इसको, और सबसे बड़ा चीज़ उसका वजह यह है कि हम लोग हमेशा देखते हैं कि ये देश इलेक्शन मोड में ही रहता है। कोई इलेक्शन ख़त्म नहीं होता है, दूसरा का नंबर आ जाता है। तो जो जनता का काम होना है, जो डेवलपमेंट का काम होना है, वो कहीं न कहीं स्लो डाउन हो जाता है उसका पूरा प्रक्रिया।
I'm not sure in what form and shape it is. You know, the devil lies in the detail. So therefore, we'll have to see the details. We'll have to see what the government is thinking in terms of constitutional amendment, in terms of gathering support. Will they call for an all-party meeting? Will they take all of us into confidence? Will they ensure that the regional parties, their ambitions, their aspirations are also taken into account? So we'll really have to see the details of the bill before we can actually commit to anything.
Well, the focus now clearly shifts towards the Parliament. Now, of the 47 political parties that submitted their views, that's to the President Kovind panel, 32 parties who are mostly affiliated with the NDA supported this proposal, while opposition parties, including the Congress, had raised strong objections. Now, parties like the Bharat Rashtriya Samiti or the Biju Janata Dal, which are not a part of either the NDA or the India bloc, are yet to take a stand on simultaneous elections. And well, joining me now to help us decode this issue and to understand what the road forward may look like, I have with me Professor Jagdeep Chokar, founding member and trustee of the Association for Democratic Reforms, as well as senior advocate at the Apex Court, Mr. Sanjay Hegde, joining us live. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, being a part of this discussion. Professor Chokar, let me come to you. We've discussed this issue in the past as well. Tell us now, in terms of the way forward, the constitutional amendments that have been proposed, how easy or challenging will it be for the government to take it forward, given as how the NDA does not have a special majority in either the Rajya Sabha or the Lok Sabha? They have a simple majority, but the constitutional amendment will require a special majority, a two-thirds majority.
Well, I do not think the constitutional amendments will be approved either by the Parliament or by the state assemblies. It's as simple as that. It is not a matter where the party in power can rustle up a coalition by doing all kinds of things. This is a lengthy process. You require two-thirds majority in the Lok Sabha and in the Rajya Sabha. Then you require simple majorities in 50% of the states. Now, that is not going to happen as far as I see, given the state of our current polity. Because this issue is not simply of, all the reasons that are given in favor of simultaneous elections. The most fundamental reason given is that it will save money. I find this reason to be extremely painful, embarrassing, and pretty much abhorrent. Are we putting a money value on democracy? Are we looking for the cheapest possible democracy, or are we looking for the most effective and workable democracy? I mean, and to say, as somebody just was saying, that the money spent on elections can be used on development. I mean, is our democracy and development mutually exclusive? I mean, all the reasons given, I can go into all the reasons and go on and on and on, because this discussion has been going on for the last 6 years. And we go around the same thing, and all of a sudden something new comes up, that a committee has been formed and the committee's report has been approved by the cabinet, and now the bill has been approved by the cabinet. Even if the constitutional amendments go through, I will tell you that it will be challenged in the courts, and I, for one, will challenge it, because it is against the basic structure of the Constitution by way of the federal character of the Constitution. It is a backdoor attempt to bring in a presidential form of government, which I have no problem with. But if you want to bring in a presidential form of government, please go ahead and do that, and let there be a national discussion on that, rather than doing it with a sleight of hand and trying to say that we'll save money, we will do development, and we will do this. Politicians will start working for development. I mean, all the reasons given are so flimsy that one doesn't even feel like commenting on them. So to come back to your question, I don't think these constitutional amendments, because there is not one amendment, there are at least 5 or 6 articles of the Constitution that have to be amended, and it's not going to be possible as far as I can see.
Right, Professor Chokar. In fact, some have estimated the total number of amendments required constitutional could go up to as high as 18. That's, of course, subject to getting a draft copy of what this bill actually looks like, which, of course, is another pain point that many will be flagging in the days to come as to what does this bill looks like in the first place. So, Mr. Hegde, same question to you. How difficult will it be for the government to make this transition, to make this bill go through the parliament, through the state assemblies? And asking you the same question, I'll just bring in the caveat of another key decision that we've seen, and not in the very distant past, which was Article 370. There we found that parties which were not necessarily in the opposition blocks, the likes of the BSP, the BJD at that time, the AIADMK, and very surprisingly, even the Aam Aadmi Party had supported the abrogation of Article 370 in terms of stacking up those numbers. Does it seem likely this time? The fact that the cabinet has approved suggests that there has been some amount of math work done in submitting this bill before the parliament.
I'm not sure that the math work has been done. If you've gone by the track record of this government over the past decade, they often need to have something dynamic for the 9 o'clock news. So this is, though this is something that they've been talking about for a long period of time, the math work right now does not seem to be entirely in their favor. They'll be dependent on their allies. I did see somebody from the Nitish Kumar's party supporting it, but as they will find themselves dependent on their allies to get a basic majority also. 2/3, they will have to persuade a lot of people to not attend the House. Of course, they have various ways of trying to get that done. The thing is that this will all be challenged, as Jagdeep told you. I do think that this violates the basic structure of the Constitution itself, not only on federalism, but in terms of a representative democracy as well. As Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia famously put it, Zinda Qaum 5 saal ke liye intezar nahi karti hai. You may complain that these frequent elections keep politicians and administrators preoccupied, but it is only because of these elections that the people are able to get their voice heard, get their little things done. Otherwise, you will have to wait 5 years for every Ladki Behan Yojana or some Ayushman Bharat Yojana. It will possibly lead to more and more of the regional parties saying this is anti-federal and that they will not be supporting it. In fact, Mamata Banerjee has already put out rather a large tweet about the subject, saying that her party opposes it and called it a death knell of democracy.
Sure. Let me take that across to Professor Chokar. Professor Chokar, one question I want to ask you, and again, playing the devil's advocate here, is number one, the cost of the elections, number one. The latest figures, some figures that were doing the rounds is that the 2024 general elections cost the economy about 1.35 lakh crore rupees. These are very, very large numbers we're discussing here. If we want a more efficient system, can a case be made that perhaps it's best that at least at the assembly as well as the Lok Sabha, the parliamentary elections, there is some amount of alignment, some synchronization?
You know, the amount of money that you have mentioned gets spent. One has to see how it is spent and who spends it. The figures, the latest figures that I have is that the Election Commission of India spends about at the most 5,000 crores. All the remaining money is spent by political parties and candidates. And despite the so-called limits on the expenditure that can be incurred by the candidates, there is not, in my opinion, not a single candidate spends that amount of money. Every candidate spends more money than is permitted. And to top it all, there is no limit for political parties at all. And a large amount of this expenditure happens to be done through illegal money, because the activities that are done under the garb of elections, those activities are also not legally permitted. So there is a whole black economy which works in the election, and that is not going to stop whether there is a simultaneous election or the elections as they are currently happening.
Sure.
Because political parties are not functioning as democratic entities. As a matter of fact, I can tell you that not a single political party in the country is internally democratic in its functioning. And therefore, political parties have become something like corporate entities for whom it is an event where they have to succeed so that they can raise money over the next 5 years. So the whole process has nothing to do with democracy. It is a money-making activity. The elections and the outcomes are all based on how much money people spend and then how much money do they make.
Sure.
You have the examples of what happened in Maharashtra recently. The amount of money spent in Maharashtra is anybody's guess. So holding the election together is not going to stop or reduce the expenditure, because the Election Commission's expenditure will perhaps go up. As the Election Commission has already said.
Right, Professor.
There will
so
be
no guarantee of the money tap.
Sorry?
Right, Professor. So no guarantee of the money tap essentially shutting down is what you're saying, even if the elections are held together. We're running out of time, Mr. Hegde. Let me come to you. One more question. You were talking about Mamata Banerjee. The question that has been raised, the concern that has been raised by some of the smaller regional parties like the TMC is essentially that the narrative at the state level, at the municipal level, will get subdued, will get overwhelmed by the national picture, and that will work towards the detriment of a federal structure, of a federal establishment, of some of these smaller regional parties. Is that a valid concern, or is that perhaps not giving due to the voters, that they can make their own smart decisions in terms of which leaders to pick at which institutions and which level?
See, we sometimes have events or campaigns which work for that campaign alone. Like, can you imagine if it had been one nation, one vote at the time that Mrs. Gandhi got assassinated, and then you had the elections of 1984. And you had a 400-seat majority there. So you cannot necessarily tie elections to all elections all over the country to one date, more so when the electoral cycle is almost necessarily bound to go out of sync, because there may be states where there are fractured mandates. You may have to redo elections. Then it will again go out of the 5-year cycle. So we will have to see the nature of the amendments unless you have fixed parliamentary terms, so that irrespective of what happens, you will not elect a fresh parliament or a fresh legislature for 5 years. Then you will end in a worse situation, possibly sometimes, of governments without a majority running it. We
So interesting days lie ahead
have
of us,
not
at least as far as the winter session. Right, Mr. Hegde, I'm just having to intervene there for want of time. Interesting days ahead. Important to point out that the BJP has issued a 3-line whip suggesting that the action, that the tabling of the bill may not be far away. As Mr. Hegde was pointing out, the composition of this bill, what the nature of those amendments